All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Carrie Lichty, and I am the Assistant Director of Marketing and Communications here at the Louisville Institute. You are here for the 2025 First Book Grant for Scholars of Color webinar. This is going to be a quick overview of the program. We will try to answer all the questions that we could possibly answer. And if you are looking for specifics about your particular project, this is not the place for that, but we'll give you information on how to provide that for those questions. I'll be posting some things in the chat, like links and things like that. Please feel free to use the Q&A section at the bottom to post your questions. I will answer as many questions as possible during the webinar, and then we'll wrap up some at the end. Amy is going to be talking for about 25 minutes or so, and then we'll allow the last 15 minutes for any Q&A that we have. So now I'm going to turn this over to Amy Moiso, who is the Associate Director at the Louisville Institute, and she is our Program Officer for the First Book Grant for Scholars of Color.
Thank you, Carrie. Greetings to everybody. We're glad that you're here with us today and interested in this First Book Grant for Scholars of Color. This is one of our, we like all of our grants, but this is a particularly special one because of its real focus on wanting to elevate and promote early career scholars of color and help them get situated in an academy that has not always been welcoming to them. So we're glad you're here and happy to tell you about this grant. So to start with, a little bit about our mission. If you don't know anything about the Louisville Institute, as I was just looking at the names of the folks who are on this call, I do see some familiar names. So some of you already know this, but for those of you who might not be aware of what we do, our mission is to bridge church and academy through awarding grants and fellowships to those who both lead and study, so pastors and scholars, who lead and study North American religious institutions, practices, and movements, and thereby promote scholarship that strengthens the church, the academy, and society, and ultimately contributes to the flourishing of the church. So as you can see here, we have several different pieces, but really what we're interested in is that bridge between church and academy and the flourishing of the church through this kind of scholarship that you all are engaged in. We have 6 grants and fellowships right now: the Pastoral Study Project Grant, the Grant for Researchers, the First Book Grant for Scholars of Color, which is what we're going to talk about today, and 3 fellowship programs: the Doctoral Fellowship for early students in their PhD programs, Dissertation Fellowship for the last year of dissertation writing, and the Postdoctoral Fellowship for when you've finished your PhD and you want to do a couple years of teaching. We are doing some webinars about those fellowships later in the summer. So if you're interested in those, keep your eye out for those invitations if you haven't seen them already. As some of you are maybe just finishing your dissertations or just in your early career and have other colleagues who might be interested in those fellowships. So about the First Book Grant. The first thing I want to ask you to do is to go to the website and download the application guide from the page about the First Book Grant for Scholars of Color. Everything I say in this webinar today is in this guide, so I'm going to be referencing it as we go through. If you don't have it in front of you, that's okay, but just so you know, I will be referencing it, and I'll be telling you what page I'm talking about. So the page that you're seeing right now is the first page of that guide. I think Carrie's going to put that link up in the chat for you all, so you can download that and have that in front of you. But in any case, if you miss something along the way in this webinar, know that it's in the guide, and you can always go back and find it later. So first of all, what is the First Book Grant for Scholars of Color? I'm looking at page 2 of the guide. Here are the basics. The First Book Grant for Scholars of Color this year is going up to $55,000, and they're grants to support early career religion scholars of color, and that's a broad understanding of what religion means. So it could be in theological education, sociology, religion, history, etc. We want to support those early career scholars to complete reading, research, and writing on their first book. And the first books can be about Christian faith and life, practice of ministry, religious trends and movements, Christian and other faith-based institutions, and religion and social issues. So a very broad category of what we're looking for in that first book that you might be working on. Who is eligible for a first book grant? So here's where we get a little bit more specific. This is on page 3 of the guide. Eligible candidates for this grant are self-identified persons of color. We don't designate that for you. You designate it for us. You've completed your terminal research degree, usually a PhD or THD. So if you're still in your program, this is not the grant for you. Please look at our fellowships. We want you to be a pre-tenured faculty member working already in a full-time tenure track or renewable contract or continuing academic position. The idea here is that the first book grant is to help you get tenure or to help you get that continuing contract at the institution of higher education where you're working. Institution can vary. It can be a seminary or a theological school, or it can be a college and university. It does not have to be religiously affiliated for you to get the first book grant. And you can be in any department within those schools as well, as long as you yourself are focused on this bridging of church and academy in the work that you're doing. So again, we're expecting that you are already a faculty member somewhere and you're working toward a tenure, toward being tenured or toward a renewable contract. And writing this book is going to help get you there. That's the intention of this grant. So to that end, you should be engaged in a scholarly research project that's going to lead to publication of a first book. Or if your first book was your dissertation and that's already finished, but you need a second book for tenure, this can be your second book too. That sort of counts as a first book post-dissertation for our purposes. Again, the idea here is to help you get done what you need to do toward tenure. And then finally, the idea behind this grant is that you're going to negotiate time away from your work in order to be able to do this work, this research that will get you finished with the book. So we are hoping that you're able to negotiate release time, a sabbatical, or this grant may be offering a second semester of the sabbatical to help you be free of those teaching and administrative responsibilities so that you can do your project. One of the reasons why this grant exists is because we know scholars of color especially get heavily burdened in those early years in particular, but throughout their careers with sort of those extracurricular things like mentoring and advising of other scholars of color, of students of color, of being put on multiple committees, et cetera. So the idea behind this grant is that we want to give you money so you can get out of those responsibilities and get your actual book done. So that's the idea behind this grant. To that end, how can you use first book grants? So there's really two ways and there's one primary way. So usually, this is on page 4, usually what happens is the first book grant buys release or sabbatical time for you. Oftentimes it supplements an existing sabbatical with a second semester or term. So you go to your institution, you're already getting one sabbatical, you say, hey, I've got this grant and I want to take a second semester with this grant money. Occasionally, we also do grants for actual research materials and assistance. So for example, if you already have the sabbatical, but what you really need is to be able to travel around the country to do particular kinds of research, that is possible too. You can use the grant in that way. Sometimes it's a combination where you're going to do one semester off and then the second semester, you're going to do a course buyout plus some research materials or something like that. That's another way that you can use the first book grant. The vast majority of first book grants are that first category of sabbatical release time. Occasionally, we do see the other ones as well. So both of them are okay. Just a quick little side note here, because I'm sure there are questions about this. If you teach somewhere that doesn't grant sabbaticals, or you're not eligible for a sabbatical through your institution, just let us know. I didn't put the email in here, but the email to ask this question is grants@louisville-institute.org, grants@louisville-institute.org. And we'll just talk you through what that looks like for your application. We know that sabbatical processes are changing at institutions all over the place, so we don't want to be too regimented about what the sabbatical looks like with you and where you're working or with your contract if you're not tenure track, but just be in touch with us so that we can help talk you through that and figure out what's going to be best. So the timeline for this grant looks like this. Application due date is January of next year, January 2025. January 15th, and the awards are announced in April of 2025. And you can take this grant and use it anywhere in the academic year of 2025 to 2026. So fall of 2025, spring 2026, or within the calendar year of 2026. So if you're taking off a year, it can be that academic year starting at the fall of 2025 or the calendar year of 2026. Of course, you may also have some different piece of that, like maybe it's a summer and a spring and a summer term or a summer and a fall term. That all is fine too. Just for reference, that's the larger time period. And then we have you attend winter seminar in January of 2026. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in just a second, but those are the dates for winter seminar, January 21st to 23rd of 2026, not this coming January, just after you apply, but a year from then. All right, so what is winter seminar? This is on page 6. Winter seminar is a 3-day gathering in Louisville. We invite you and award recipients from a couple other of our programs to come together and talk about your projects. It's a great opportunity to meet with other folks who are doing interesting work, to hear what they're doing, to hear their feedback on your project, to give feedback on their projects, to collaborate. We pay all your expenses. We fly you to Louisville, we put you up in a hotel, and we talk together about our projects for a few days. Attendance is required as a stipulation for this grant. And again, those dates are January 21 to 23, 2026. So mark those on your calendar now. All right, how do you apply for a first book grant? Well, first you download the guide and you look at the guide pages 7 through 12. These are the pages that talk specifically about the application. So download that guide and read it through carefully. And if you are requesting a sabbatical, make sure you start that soon so that you are already in the process of doing that by the time you apply. You do not have to have your sabbatical approved or your leave approved when you apply, but we will want to know that you've started that process. A lot of times institutions will end up saying, in the event this person receives a grant, they will get this leave. So that's sort of what we're looking for in terms of confirmation that you're going to be granted the leave that you've requested. You're going to create an online profile in our application portal, put in your name and address and all that good stuff. And then you're going to prepare all your application materials and submit them by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on January 15th. Everything is submitted online. Send any questions. Here's that email address again, grants@louisville-institute.org. That is monitored by a living person, not a chat bot. So when you send a message there, you will get an answer to your question. From an actual person who can talk you through whatever questions you have. Okay, what is involved in the application itself? Again, I'm looking at the guide pages 8 to 12. Key pieces. First of all, we want to know the core question you're exploring, why it's important to you, your community, and the church in North America. Real basic. What is it? What is your research question and why is it important, right? This isn't just a matter of arguing for its importance in the academy or its importance for your tenure or something like that. We really want to know why it's important to you. Why are you passionate about this? It's important to have all those research elements in place too, but we're actually really interested in your own excitement and enthusiasm for your project. You're going to that end, you're going to write an essay describing the whole process that includes that question and its importance. And then your regular research things. What are your methods and approaches? How are you going to analyze your data? Who's going to be involved? Who are your partners? What's the timeline? What resources are you going to use? And then what do you hope the impact or outcome of the project will be? In this case, we know it's going to be a book. What kind of book? How is it going to influence the church? How is it going to make a statement that complements what's already out there, those kinds of things. This is all detailed in much more specificity in the actual application guide, but this just gives you an overview. One thing I want to say here is if you are revising your dissertation as your first book, totally fine. We are going to want to see that you're doing some new research and not just editing, because we want to fund actual new research. So make sure if you're revising your dissertation, you talk about what the dissertation was about and why that was important, but then what you're going to do next. How are you transforming that and adding to it for this book project? We're going to ask you for a bibliography, only 2 to 3 pages. Doesn't have to put everything in there you've ever read, just a real curated list of the kinds of things that really matter for your project. A budget plan, which I'll say more about in a second. Your CV or resume only has to be 4 pages. In fact, please don't send us any more than 4 pages, just the real highlights of who you are and where you've been. There are 2 letters of recommendation as part of this. These are described in detail in the application guide, but just as a quick reference, one of them is going to be from a colleague who can speak to your capacity for this work and to your engagement with these issues. And the other one is going to be from somebody who kind of knows the field and can talk about the importance and feasibility of the project, why the project itself is important. So one's more about you as a scholar and the other's more about the project. That again is described in detail in the application guide itself. And then finally, the other thing that we want in there is a letter of release from your academic dean or department chair or whoever else it is in your context that gives leave. The idea is that we want that little message that says, yes, you're going to get the leave if you get this grant. We know that sabbatical timelines are a little bit strange. So if you have any issues with the timing of that, that can be included in the letter, right? That these decisions are going to be made at this date, but we anticipate that this person's going to get leave, that kind of thing. Again, if you have questions, go ahead and send us an email about that. All right, so what's the selection process for this grant? This is on page 5. We always appoint a selection committee of scholars and former grantees for each of our grants and fellowships. So this is a combination of people from various backgrounds and fields of study, but usually within the realm of theological education or religious studies. So they're going to have some knowledge of the kinds of things you're working on, but maybe not specific knowledge about your topic. The committee reviews all the proposals and they meet to select grantees about 8 weeks after the application due date, gives them time to read all the applications. This is one of our smaller grant programs. We typically receive about 20 applications, which is not very many compared to some of our ones that are in the hundreds. But it's such a specific and focused grant that we really get excellent candidates in this very small pool. We will be awarding 3 grants in 2025 out of those 20-ish applications. And the awards will be announced in April, as I said. Okay. You might be wondering what we're looking for in an application, what makes an application strong. This is also on page 5. First of all, a clear and intriguing core question and articulation of what its importance is. So as I said, you can write about the importance of it to the academy or what contribution it's going to make to your field. Those are all important. We also want to know why it matters to the church in North America, why it matters to you, how it bridges the church and academy. So unlike some other places where you might really have to be specific about the contribution to your field, this is a place where we really want to know about you and why it matters to you and why you're passionate about this project. We do want to have a thoughtful and intentional research plan that responds to all the essay prompts. Again, they're all listed in the application guide. We want to know what the outcome, what you think the outcome or impact will be, or what you hope it will be. Again, why it matters to you. Complete and well-constructed application elements. We're not checking you're doing a copy edit on what you send in, but we would like you to put page numbers on the application if it says, please put page numbers on your essay. So follow the directions and put together what is requested in the format that's requested. We're not going to police the little teeny details of it, but at the same time, those little teeny details in a tight competition can make a difference. If you have a book contract at the time you apply, that's great. Put that in there. If you're in conversation with publishers, feel free to put that in there. It's not required to apply. And it's not necessarily a detriment to you if you do not have a book contract yet, but it can be a plus if you do have one. So make sure you list in there where you are in terms of finding a book contract or finding a publisher. And then, of course, follow the directions. All right, a couple more things. About budgets. This is a slightly different grant than some of our other grants because most people in this grant are just getting money toward a sabbatical and the money's going straight to the institution. But basically, we still need one of 2 things in your application. This is in the guide from page 13 to 20 covers budgets. The first one is, again, for the vast majority for sabbatical leave, if the total amount of your grant's going straight to salary and benefit replacement to your institution for semester sabbatical, and the money's going to the institution, all you have to do is put a statement that says that. And I'm going to show you a sample of that in just a second. If you're asking for research funds for research materials, assistance, travel, those kinds of things, then you have to put together a line item budget and a budget narrative. I'm going to talk about those too. But one of these 2 things needs to be included in your application. Either that statement that it's all going to the institution or that detailed budget plan. If you're doing salary benefit replacement, this is what it looks like. Very simple. This is all in the guide. Something like a statement that says the total amount of this grant, $55,000, is going to be made payable to your institution, used for salary benefit replacement for your research leave during this time period. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's all you have to do. If you're requesting funds for research materials or for other kinds of support for your research, then you're going to do a budget proposal. It's going to have 2 parts. First part is a line item budget, which is like an Excel spreadsheet where you list the categories and how much money is going into each category. And then you're going to do a budget narrative where for each of those line items, you tell us why you need the money for that, how you got to that amount, and how it's going to help you complete your project. So if you're doing a budget proposal, that has two parts. Again, all this is in the application guide, so I'm not going to go into details here. Please feel free to ask us if you have questions. A couple other things to know as we conclude this part. You can ask for feedback on your project if you like. This is in the guide on page 6. It's on, we have an online form. It's on the web page where the grant is described, and it's in the guide. And we're going to ask you to answer 3 questions through this form. One is, what's your primary question? One is, why is this project important to you and your community and the Church of North America? These are short answers. You do not have to go long on these. We just want a general idea. And then 3, how are you going to carry it out? What kinds of things are you thinking about in terms of your research methods? What do you need to do? Where do you need to go? And why are you choosing those strategies? The idea here is we can give you some feedback on whether your project seems feasible, whether it matches our requirements, those kinds of things. We unfortunately do not have the capacity to read your whole proposal and give you feedback. We just don't have enough staff to do that. And the projects are too vast. We have too many different things, but we have constructed this feedback form so that we can at least give you a little bit of some feedback. Some tips and advice. Start early. Make sure you know ahead of time what you need to prepare so you're not scrambling at the end. You all are already doing that because you're on this webinar and it's like 6 months till the application date. So well done. Congratulations, you're already ahead of the curve. We don't accept applications after the due date though, so you do need to get them in on time. You can look through previous grantees on our website and see the kinds of things we've funded in the past. Doesn't mean that we won't fund something on a similar topic in the future just because we've done it in the past, but it might help you situate your own project in contrast to something that's already happened or in partnership with or collaboration with that project. Ask questions and seek feedback from us as soon as possible. Feedback takes a long time. I'm the one who gives the feedback and I'm way behind right now because we get so many at once. So ask a question early and I'll try and get to it earlier and we answer them in the order received. Share your application with colleagues to get their input and ideas. A bunch of you, as I am, have not graduated that long ago from PhD programs. Who knows how to write grant applications? Most of us did not learn that when we were in our PhD programs. So ask around. It's okay to look on our website, see people who've received grants in the past, who you might know, and write to them and say, hey, do you have any feedback for me? Can I pick your brain about how best to write this grant application, etc.? Please feel free to contact your colleagues. And then finally, give your recommenders plenty of notice about that timeline so that they're ready when the time comes. You're going to put their names and contact information in the application portal, and then they get an email from us prompting them to turn in their letter. So they have a little bit of extra time after the initial due date to get their letters in, but it's good for them to know ahead of time that they're going to need to do that. And then, as always, follow the instructions, please. What else do you need to know? A couple little things. You can only apply for 1 grant or fellowship per our year, which is June 1 to May 31st. So if you're going to apply for the first book grant, we can't have you apply for the grant for researchers or any of the other things in this year. It's just too many applications for us, and we can't have you in simultaneously in different committees at the same time. So just 1 per year. You can apply again in the future though. If you've received a grant or fellowship from us before, you have to complete all your paperwork before you apply again. This is a sort of a weird thing, but you can't hold multiple grants from Lilly endowment organizations that together total more than $55,000. So if you already have a grant from Lilly personally, not your institution, the institution has it, it's fine. If you personally have a grant from Lilly and it's say $5,000, you can't ask for more than $50,000 from us because the two together would be 55. If you have questions about that, because I know that's a little bit weird, go ahead and email us and we'll try and get you a good answer about how that applies to your specific situation. And here's the email address, grants@louisville-institute.org. All right, Carrie, what questions do we have?
We actually just only have a few, and this one is about timing. Do both semesters of the sabbatical need to be taken back to back? For example, if I get a teaching release for my 3rd year for 1 semester, would the Louisville grant sabbatical have to be used directly before or after my institution's teaching release?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure if we've had that before. I think from our side, it doesn't really matter too much, except that you have to take the part that's funded by us during our timeline. So you're really, like, say you have spring release this coming spring, and you're going to take spring release the following spring under us. That's great because that's within the timeline that we offer, right? Fall of 2025 through the calendar year 2026. But you couldn't take your release from your institution in 2026 and then take the second semester from us in 2027. You have to do that release within our timeline. Does that make sense? Carrie, you have a frowny face, but I think it's just your thinking face. I just wanted to make sure that I was
No, you're
not saying something weird. Okay.
You're not. You're good. Uh, as far as feedback, we mentioned feedback applying forward. So what if someone applied previously? Can they ask for feedback on our previous application?
You can, but generally speaking, you're probably going to get a better response by prompting via the new thing that you're going to do. So it may be that you're actually doing the same project again, right? That you're just applying to do the same project. Hang on, I'm going to interrupt myself and say this differently. Yes, you can ask for feedback on your previous grant. A lot of times that's far enough in the past that I'm not going to remember about that grant very much. So you might have a better response from me if you write it up again in the feedback form, or a more current response from me if you write it up again and put it in the feedback form. I have tried to respond to people who've asked for feedback on their previous applications, and I just get really far behind. So it's sometimes it's easier and better for you to send a new request based on where you are right now with the project, so that I can respond to that rather than where you were a year ago or 6 months ago when you applied before.
And I will also note on that is at requesting feedback from previous applications. Remember, our selection committees are different every year. So something that may not have been noticed or was noticed at that time may be completely different the next time. So just think about that. I will, let's see. If you don't get a first book grant during one cycle, can you reapply? Yes, you can certainly reapply. That probably depends a lot on your institution. So if you are up for sabbatical, that may be dependent on the timing of your institution. Let's see. Questions about payments as far as who the grant can be paid to. Typically, our grants are paid directly to the institutions, particularly with this program since it is for sabbatical. Amy, there is a question about if it can be paid directly to the individual for contingent faculty. Do you have a better answer on that?
I think the best thing to do is to just email us with your specific situation so we can talk it through a little bit with you. Sometimes there are tax implications for you if you receive it directly rather than through your institution. So it would be probably better to just talk it through with you and see what your situation is. So go ahead and send us an email with your question, and then we'll go from there.
And again, anything to the grants at louisville-institute.org is super helpful. Before we keep going, I just want to let you know we've kind of wrapped up the main part of this. We're going to be around for another 15 minutes or so, keeping asking questions. So feel free to stay on. Feel free to keep asking questions. Just want to name where we're at. Concerning letters of recommendation, is it a plus to get the department chair's support through a letter of recommendation? Is there a benefit there?
I wouldn't say that there's a specific benefit, because theoretically the department chair is going to already be affirming that you've been given leave to do the project. What I would say is the most effective recommendation letters are the ones who know you and your work the best and can speak to those things. So if that is your department chair, that's great. If it's somebody else, that's maybe better. So if your department chair is someone you know really well and who knows you really well, I think that's a great recommendation source. But generally I would lean toward who's going to be able to speak most strongly about the project and about you carrying it out.
Great. So this is actually related to kind of the Lilly grant, and having our cap of 55,000. So we have someone who's co-principal investigator, has a Lilly grant for the institution for a group of colleagues. So that will be different from, yes, you can absolutely receive this grant for yourself, and it is not what we would call double dipping or
Right.
conflict of interest, anything like that. So
Yeah.
your other grant is a grant made to your institution. You are a part of that. That is fine. That is not your personal grant, even though this personal grant would be paid to your institution. So you are totally fine.
Yeah.
It's a strange little world sometimes. Do most institutions usually need the full 55,000 for a semester? If not, would we need to just ask our institution how much they would require and apply for that?
I would say in that case, that's up to you. You probably should ask your institution what it would take to get a semester off. This grant has increased from 40,000 last year to 55,000 this year, and that's partly because 55 was not enough for some institutions, for salary and benefits, to cover salary and benefits. So ask your institution and then apply for whatever makes sense. If your institution only needs 45,000 and there's 10,000 more on the table, you might consider applying for 55 and get 10,000 to do more research or to have a research assistant or something else. The 55,000 is there on our end. So we want to give it away to you. So if you want to apply for that full 55 and use the 10,000 for something else, if your institution doesn't need it all, that's okay.
Good question here. Since this is a highly competitive grant, if you have applied before, do you suggest reapplying?
I do suggest reapplying. We have had people who applied one year and got it the second year because they improved their application from year to year. One of the things that can be helpful about asking for feedback is you can say in your feedback request, I applied last year and I'm applying again. And here's my topic. And that sometimes will trigger me like, oh, I remember this project and I can give you some feedback on the project. But more importantly, if there are carryover people on that committee and they see you've applied 2 years in a row, they're going to look back at what they did before and see how you've improved or changed your application. So that can be a vote in your favor. Sometimes we get applications a second time that are exactly the same as the first time. And that tends to not look as good to our committees because it doesn't feel like that somebody's actually gone back and say run their application by a colleague to see what could be improved or considered new things in the last year since they applied last that they want to include in their project now. So it can be good to make sure that you have done some of that work when you apply so that the selection committee can see, the ones who are repeating anyway, can see what you've done in that past year. But I would not say that applying again is a bad thing or that you're going to be discounted in some way because you've applied before. We definitely have people who apply more than once all the time for all of our grants. That is not unusual at all.
So that is the last of the questions in our chat. I do have someone who would like to ask a question. David.
David is muted, I think.
Yep.
Do you have to unmute him or does he have to unmute himself?
He does. So David, I sent you a thing. If you want to unmute and speak, that is fine. Or if you want to put your question in the chat, that is fine as well.
While we're waiting for David, let me just say one other thing, which is we do have a grant for researchers that is the same amount as the first book grant. And so if that makes more sense for you to do a project that's not related to the first book grant for scholars of color, or you're interested in being a different kind of pool, that grant, we're going to give 25 of those grants this coming year, but the pool may be as many as 100 to 200 applications. So that gives you kind of a frame of this is maybe 20 applications and 3 grants versus 100 to 200 applications and 25 grants. They're all the same amount of money. So be looking at that on the website too to see if that suits your timeline or your needs better.
All right. David already asked this question, so we are
Oh, great.
good.
Perfect.
So we are going to wrap up our session right now. This will be available. I have one more question I'm kind of answering in the
Yep.
chat right now, but this will wrap up everything that we're on right now. Again, Amy and I will be on for the next few minutes. So if you still have any questions, feel free to ask. You are welcome to send any questions to grants at louisville-institute.org, or our website has all of the information you need to apply. You still have plenty of time